Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Let me ask you something. Have you ever seen someone walk into a debate thinking they've already won, only to realize too late they brought opinions to a facts fight? Or have you ever witnessed a moment so raw, so perfectly timed, that it flips the power dynamic right in front of a live national audience? Tonight we're diving into one of the most unforgettable political face-offs ever broadcast on television when Representative Jasmine Crockett stepped onto the stage with fire. But Kash Patel came armed with something more powerful: receipts. This isn't just about politics, it's about preparation versus performance, truth versus theatrics. As the spotlight burned brighter and the documents piled higher, the entire studio and eventually the internet watched a shift happen in real time. Stick around, because what happened on that Fox News stage wasn't just a clash of ideologies, it was a masterclass in how substance still has the power to silence noise. Let's get into it. It was 7:03 p.m. inside the Fox News studio in Atlanta, Georgia. Backstage, the air felt like static before a thunderstorm charged. Restless, Kash Patel stood quietly near the curtain, his hands tucked behind his back, gripping a thick manila folder. His suit, slate gray and custom-fitted, didn't move, but his pulse did. Through the speakers, Representative Jasmine Crockett's voice echoed with controlled fire. She wasn't holding back. "Kash Patel is nothing more than a megaphone for a former president," she said confidently. "He's loud, but hollow, exactly what you'd expect from someone who's never truly had to face a national security threat head-on." From behind the curtain, Patel could see her silhouette framed by the bright studio lights. Crockett wore a navy blue suit, sharp as her words. She pointed toward the crowd, commanding the stage like she owned it. The applause from a cluster of progressive supporters punctuated her every jab, while the other half of the room, mostly MAGA loyalists, booed with a vengeance. The divide in the room was palpable. It wasn't just a political debate, it was a battleground. Crockett paced slightly, heels clicking against the polished floor. "He spends more time writing dramatic posts on social media than actually defending the country," she continued. "He talks about security, but can't explain the basics of a classified threat. This is the person we're supposed to trust with intelligence?" Her supporters clapped louder now, feeding on her confidence. She had built her brand on boldness, on standing firm in front of powerful men and telling them exactly what she thought. And tonight she thought she had Patel exactly where she wanted him. Exposed, outdated, and unprepared. What she didn't know was that Patel hadn't come to play defense. He looked down at the folder in his handsaw. A simple label on the corner read, "Source, FOIA, verified." Inside were official documents, unedited, public. He had spent weeks preparing for this debate. Not to out-talk her, but to out-prove her. This wasn't just a political appearance for Patel. It was a chance to flip the script. Laura Thompson, the host of the night's special segment, smiled into the camera. "Strong words from Representative Crockett," she said. "Now, let's welcome our next guest. Please give a round of applause to the Director of the FBI, Mr. Kash Patel." The stage lights shifted. Patel took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and walked out under the hot glow of the cameras. The audience clapped first from the conservative side, then trickling across the room. A few even stood. It was clear they respected his presence, if not his politics. He gave a small nod to the crowd, then glanced at Crockett, who was now seated opposite the stage, a polite smirk curving her lips. Patel didn't return it. He didn't need to. The contrast between them couldn't be more vivid. Crockett, young and bold, with the energy of someone who'd fought her way into the room. Patel, older and composed, wearing the expression of a man who'd spent years walking those rooms before she ever got there. The air was tight. No one moved. The producers in the back whispered into earpieces. The camera operators leaned in. This wasn't just another cable news debate. Something felt different. Patel approached his podium. He didn't shuffle his papers. He didn't sip water. He simply rested one hand on the folder and waited for the cue. Laura Thompson raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Patel, you've heard what Representative Crockett had to say. What's your response?" He smiled gently. "I think we're all in for a very clarifying evening." That was it. No fireworks, no insults, Just quiet confidence and a folder full of receipts. In that moment, the room knew. This wasn't going to be a typical political sparring match. This was going to be something else. Something unforgettable. The lights on stage shifted to a cooler tone. The air between the two podiums grew dense. Two voices. Two visions of the country. About to collide. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her posture relaxed, but her eyes focused. The opening was hers. "With all due respect," she began, "national security isn't about how many classified briefings you've attended. It's about how many people you've truly protected." A few cheers erupted from her side of the audience. She didn't pause. It's easy to sit in a secure room and call yourself experienced. It's harder to look voters in the eye, especially in communities like mine in Dallas, and explain why we're still underfunded, over-policed, and left behind. She let that sink in. Kash Patel remained still. No fidgeting, no rebuttal yet. Jasmine continued, "We can't keep treating national security as if it only exists at our borders. It's also in our classrooms, in our hospitals, in our neighborhoods. But some people," she gestured lightly toward Patel, "only care about walls and war budgets, not the real threats happening at home." The applause was stronger now. Crockett turned slightly to address the audience directly. "Let me say it clearly. I didn't go to an Ivy League school, but I legislate like I own one." That line hit like thunder. Even Laura Thompson, who had stayed carefully neutral until now, raised her eyebrows. From the far side of the room, a woman named Marisol Vega sat up straighter. She was a college student, first generation, daughter of a Mexican immigrant housekeeper. She had slept in cars, studied under parking lot lights, and now sat in the live audience of a national broadcast. And in that moment, Crockett was speaking directly to her. For a split second, it didn't feel like a debate. It felt like a reckoning. Then Patel shifted in his seat and reached for his microphone. "May I?" he asked the moderator. His voice was low, measured. Laura nodded. Patel straightened his spine. "Miss Crockett says she legislates like she went to the Ivy League," he began, a slight smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "But national security isn't about who can deliver the best soundbite. It's about who can deliver results." A wave of murmurs ran through the audience. He continued, "You say you represent Dallas, but I wonder, have you ever sat across from an agent who just returned from the border? Have you seen the look in their eyes when they describe what they walk into each night?" Crockett didn't flinch, but her smile faded just slightly. Patel pressed on. "This isn't theory. This isn't social media activism. This is life and death." Now it was his turn to face the audience. "We've got agents understaffed, patrols overrun, and policies coming out of Congress that seem more focused on winning headlines than protecting citizens. And that," he looked back at Crockett, "isn't a debate. That's a crisis." The conservative side of the audience erupted. Cheers, clapping. Even a few shouts of, "That's right." Laura Thompson raised her hand to calm the crowd. But the tone had changed. This wasn't about ideology anymore. It was about who the audience believed was telling the truth. Crockett leaned in slightly. "Mr. Patel," she said, "you're passionate. I'll give you that. But here's what you forget. I've walked those neighborhoods. I've seen what happens when we confuse security with surveillance, when we fund enforcement but not education, when we militarize everything except compassion." Some heads in the audience nodded. "But let me also say this. I may not have worn a federal badge, but I've worn a courtroom pin. I've defended people the system forgot. People that sound and look nothing like you or me, but whose safety matters just as much." There was a quiet in the room. A stillness. Then Patel sat forward, eyes narrowing just a touch. "Spare me the lectures on compassion," he said, his tone firmer. "Compassion doesn't stop cartels. Hashtags don't stop fentanyl. Press releases don't bring our agents home safely." Crockett stood taller. "And neither do scare tactics dressed up as data," she shot back. Laura Thompson quickly stepped in. "Let's keep this respectful," she said, though both candidates were already locked in. The moment was electric, not because someone was yelling, but because both were speaking from their truth. Different worlds, different stakes, and the audience could feel it. And backstage, producers knew. The segment was only heating up. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Laura Thompson, sensing the growing electricity, leaned into her role as moderator. "Mr. Patel," she said, her voice calm, "Representative Crockett has challenged your record and questioned your qualifications. Would you care to respond?" Kash Patel didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached down, opened his folder, and placed a document on the table in front of him, its edges crisp, its header unmistakably official. The camera zoomed in slightly. "This," Patel began, "is an internal FBI report, released just weeks ago. Page 32, paragraph 4. He looked straight into the lens. "It shows a 25% increase in immigration-related crimes in Texas, specifically under policies that Representative Crockett has publicly supported." There was a sudden shift in the air. People in the audience leaned forward. Crockett's team behind the scenes began to whisper urgently. Crockett didn't flinch, but her posture stiffened. "That report," she said calmly, "lacks full context. It's been challenged by multiple independent analysts." "I figured you'd say that," Patel interrupted, flipping to the next page. "That's why I brought a second document. This one," he held it up for the cameras, "comes from the Department of Homeland Security. It confirms the same numbers, confirms the same trend, and it names the legislative votes that led to it votes cast by Representative Crockett." For a moment, the studio was silent. No cheers, no boos, just the hum of electricity as everyone tried to process what was unfolding. Crockett blinked but kept her voice steady. "This is political theater. You're cherry-picking documents to frame a narrative." Patel tilted his head. "If government reports are political theater, I'd love to see your script." The first ripple of laughter came from the right side of the audience. Then more. It wasn't mocking, it was surprise. The kind that hits when someone brings cold facts into a hot debate. Crockett opened her mouth to respond, but Patel wasn't finished. "One more," he said. From the folder, he pulled a printed email. Redacted names, timestamps, the words highlighted in yellow. "This is an internal memo from the campaign team you were part of," he said. "It discusses cutting Border Patrol funding in order to reallocate resources elsewhere. Humanitarian efforts, yes, but at the expense of security." He turned to the crowd. "This is what I mean. You can't weaken one pillar and expect the house to stand." Crockett raised a hand, asking to respond, but Patel held up one final document. "And then there's this." He held it delicately, like it weighed more than just paper. "This is an affidavit," he said, "from a former advisor on the House Judiciary Committee, Sarah Mitchell. She claims Representative Crockett said, and I quote, 'We need to cut funding for programs that only serve MAGA politics.'" A few gasps escaped from the audience. Even Laura Thompson looked briefly stunned. Crockett stood up straighter, her voice firm but now tinged with urgency. "That's a lie," she said. "It's fabricated, taken out of context, or worse, deliberately twisted." Patel didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. "These aren't attacks, Representative. These are documents, records, evidence." He looked to the audience, speaking not like a politician, but like a prosecutor closing an argument. "I didn't come here for applause. I came with facts. And if someone's going to accuse me of being unqualified, they should first be ready to answer for their own record." The line landed like a gavel. Some of Crockett's supporters looked around nervously. Others stayed silent. A few stood quietly, unsure of how to respond. Laura Thompson tried to regain order. "Let's allow Representative Crockett to respond." But even as Crockett began to speak, the momentum had already shifted. The audience wasn't just listening anymore. They were judging, not based on volume, not based on passion, but based on what was on paper. And tonight, Patel had come armed. The atmosphere inside the studio was no longer energetic, it was tense. What had started as Jasmine Crockett's confidence stage quickly turned into something colder. She could feel it. The stares, the silence, the weight of eyes, not cheering, but watching. Kash Patel sat quietly across from her, hands folded neatly over his stack of documents, his demeanor calm. He wasn't speaking anymore, but he didn't have to. The screen behind him still displayed the DHS report and the affidavit. He had already delivered his blow. Now, it was her turn. Laura Thompson gave her the floor. "Representative Crockett," she said softly, You've been presented with documents challenging your record. How would you like to respond? Crockett adjusted her blazer, leaned into the mic, and took a breath. Let's be clear, she began, her voice even. No one on this stage cares more about safety and security than I do, but safety must be balanced with compassion. That's what leadership is. A few audience members nodded. Others remained still. The documents you saw tonight were incomplete, she continued. They don't tell the full story of the votes I cast or the reasons behind them. In fact, most of them were part of broader reforms designed to protect families, not enable crime. Her voice was steady, but something was missing. The certainty from earlier, the spark that lit up her first jabs, was gone. In its place was defensiveness, calculated and careful. Patel didn't interrupt. He just watched. Crockett shifted gears. As a civil rights attorney, I've seen what happens when enforcement goes unchecked. People get hurt. People get forgotten. So yes, I've advocated for oversight. I've advocated for smarter funding, not just more funding. That's not weakness. That's responsibility. This time, there were scattered claps, but they didn't rise above the tension in the room. Laura leaned in. Representative, what about the affidavit, the statement from your former advisor? Crockett's jaw tightened. I never said those words. That statement is unverified, politically motivated, and frankly, it's offensive. We should be debating policies, not trading accusations based on hearsay. She looked to Patel now, locking eyes. This country deserves better than gotcha games and stacks of paperwork meant to smear a record. Patel gave the faintest nod. Not sarcastic, just acknowledging. He reached for the mic. May I respond? Laura gave him a subtle nod. Patel's tone remained calm. I agree. This country does deserve better. And it starts with accountability. Representative Crockett says the affidavit is unverified. But it's signed. It's dated. And it's backed by matching email correspondence. He tapped the folder again. She says the documents lack context, but context is what I brought. Full-page reports, source files, government records. If any of it is wrong, I invite her right now to show us where. Crockett's mouth opened, but no words came. Not immediately. The audience waited. Backstage, her aides were furiously flipping through their own binders, hoping to find something that could turn the tide. Patel leaned back in his chair, folding his hands again. He didn't push further. He didn't need to. Because the silence was doing the work for him. For the first time that evening, Crockett supporters weren't cheering. They were uncertain. Some crossed their arms. Some glanced toward the exits. Even Marisol Vega, the student who had earlier sat up with pride, now sat with her hands clasped, eyes darting between the two podiums. Crockett cleared her throat. Let me remind everyone, she said a little more forcefully, that immigration policy is complex. You cannot reduce it to a single paragraph in a single report. Leaders must weigh hundreds of variables: human rights, safety, fiscal responsibility before making a decision. Patel nodded slowly. Exactly. Which is why those decisions should be backed by facts, not slogans. There it was again, calm, direct, sharp. His words didn't rise in volume, but they cut just the same. Laura Thompson glanced toward the control booth. The producers signaled for 2 more minutes before break. She turned back to the stage. Let's allow each of you a final statement before we transition. Crockett took a sip of water, then stood straighter. I may not have brought a folder of documents, she began, but I brought experience that can't be printed on a page. I brought the lived truth of people I serve, the ones not represented in reports or budget lines. And if that makes me an easy target for someone like Mr. Patel, so be it. I'll take lived truth over filtered data any day. The audience gave a respectful applause. It was polite, but not passionate. Then Patel stood. I respect Representative Crockett's experience, he said. But lived truth and verified facts aren't enemies. They need each other. One without the other is blind. He looked out at the crowd. Tonight wasn't about defeating anyone. It was about revealing what's missing from our conversations. We can't fix problems by ignoring data. We can't lead by denying the record. And we can't pretend that slogans are the same thing as strategy. The studio was quiet. not from discomfort. But because the room had shifted from a debate to a moment of clarity, the camera cut to a wide shot as the closing credits rolled and the studio lights dimmed slightly. The live audience remained seated, stunned into silence. There was no music, no cheerful wrap-up, just the heavy, unmistakable feeling that something bigger had just happened. Kash Patel stood tall at his podium, documents neatly stacked, his expression unreadable. Jasmine Crockett remained seated, her hands folded in her lap, lips pressed into a thin line. She looked calm, but anyone watching closely could see the shift. The fire from earlier had dimmed. Laura Thompson thanked both guests and motioned for the cameras to cut. Then the studio buzzed into motion. Producers, camera operators, aides all began moving at once, some quietly, some frantically. Crockett rose quickly and walked off stage, ignoring the hand of a makeup artist trying to reset her mic. Her team circled around her like a protective wall, whispering, gesturing. She muttered something that was barely caught by a boom mic. "Call MSNBC. Now, we need to reframe this." Meanwhile, Kash Patel remained exactly where he was, calm, still. He accepted a bottle of water from one of his staffers, then turned to Laura Thompson. "That was something," she said, her professional tone briefly giving way to honesty. Patel simply nodded. Sometimes the truth lands like that. Outside the Fox News building, the story had already detonated online. Within 5 minutes, clips from the segment trended on every major platform. On X, formerly Twitter, the hashtag number Patel Receipts exploded with engagement. One video of Patel revealing the affidavit racked up 800,000 views before the segment even finished airing in the Pacific time zone. Side-by-side images of Crockett were everywhere. One from the start, smiling and bold. The other from the end, eyes lowered, expression stiff. The caption was simple but brutal. How it started, how it ended. Progressive pundits scrambled to respond. Some criticized Patel for bringing weaponized documents into what should have been a policy discussion. Others tried to spin the moment as a distraction tactic. But even among Democratic circles, there was a quiet reckoning. She got caught unprepared, one anonymous strategist admitted on a live stream. You don't walk into a policy debate without your own receipts. Conservative media went into full celebration mode. Newsmax called it one of the most decisive live debate performances in recent memory. Breitbart ran a headline that read, "Patel flips the script, exposes progressive lawmakers' record with one folder." Even neutral outlets couldn't ignore the moment. Reuters released a story titled, "Congresswoman Stumbles as Patel Presents Internal Reports on Live Television." Late-night shows took notice too. A popular comedy host joked, "Jasmine Crockett brought words. Kash Patel brought evidence. Guess which one made it to the highlight reel?" The impact wasn't just media, it was cultural. By the end of the week, a new phrase had entered the political lexicon, Patel energy. It didn't refer to ideology, referred to preparation. Thorough, measured, calm under pressure. High school debate coaches referenced it. Corporate teams joked about it in meetings. "Don't walk in here unless you've got Patel energy," someone quipped in a viral TikTok. Meanwhile, Crockett's team went into full damage control. Her spokesperson issued a statement accusing Patel of misleading the public with out-of-context documents. But the video was already out there. The public had seen the moment. They had watched her stall. They had seen her voice waver. For better or worse, the impression was made. And impressions, in the internet age, don't fade quickly. The following Monday, Crockett appeared on a morning news program to reclaim the narrative. "It's unfortunate that my record was misrepresented," she said. "But I stand by my votes, and I won't be intimidated by political theater." But it didn't land. The clip barely broke the surface online. Viewers had moved on from explanation to example. Meanwhile, Patel's inbox overflowed with invitations, panels, fundraisers, think tank roundtables. Even a few cautious reach-outs from centrist institutions that once kept him at arm's length. But Patel wasn't celebrating. He knew better. In a private moment backstage, one of his aides asked how he felt. He shrugged. "It's not about beating someone," he said. "It's about reminding people why facts still matter." And that was the part people didn't expect. Because in a political culture where shouting often wins airtime, Kash Patel hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't mocked. He hadn't gloated. He had simply laid out a record, step by step, page by page. And in doing so, he shifted the conversation. This wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a message. To elected officials, know your record. To voters, ask for proof. To the media, balance the theater with the receipts. By Friday, one photo went viral. It wasn't dramatic. It was Patel, walking out of the studio alone, folder still in hand. No entourage, no camera crew, just a man who came prepared and left with the truth intact. And that's what people remembered. Not who shouted louder, but who showed up with the facts. What just happened wasn't just a political exchange, it was a wake-up call. In a world full of sound bites and headlines, Kash Patel reminded us that showing up with facts, not just fire, still matters. And Jasmine Crockett? She reminded us that confidence without preparation can crack under the weight of truth. So here's the real question. Do you believe facts should always outweigh flair? And when public figures speak, are we asking enough of them or just cheering for whoever says it louder? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear from you. Was this a fair takedown or a tactical ambush? And if you found this story gripping, eye-opening, or just plain unforgettable, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Because around here, we don't just talk politics. We tell the stories that reveal what leadership, truth, and accountability really look like, one showdown at a time. Until next time, stay sharp, stay curious, and bring the receipts.